Okay, so just welcome everyone. So glad that everyone could be here with us this evening. I wanted to just take this opportunity to welcome you to Conversations with a Conscience. Our topic tonight will be perspectives on peace with Marc Mori and Jacob Huling will introduce our speaker for this evening. So thank you so much, Marc, for being here. And thank you, Jake, for doing this introduction for Marc. Jake is one of our World Affairs Council's interns for the spring semester, and he's a really great addition to our team here. So Jake, thank you so much for introducing our speaker.
Of course, and thank you for the warm introduction. So we actually have the privilege of having Marc Mori, who studied both in Tokyo, Mexico City, and California, bouncing around between, I believe, 12 different schools. Mr. Mori has numerous accolades, including 24 years in the FBI, and after having retired from the FBI, actually becoming a Peace Fellow and conducting.
You said next Friday?
And conducting at the University. So, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Marc Mori to the stage.
Hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and thanks to the World Affairs Council and everybody here. Now, just so that I understand who's from where, is this just a group of different high school students, or is it from one high school or various high schools? If somebody could let me know who's here with us. Is it just different membership people from different parts of the World Affairs Council?
So Marc, we have some university students, high school students, and a couple teachers with us.
Wonderful. Well, a lot of what I'd like to share with you today has to do with just some basics in peace education. My name is Marc Mori, and thank you for that kind introduction. I was an Army officer. I was an FBI agent for 24 and a half years. I was there as an Army officer in Germany when the wall came down in West Germany. As he said, I went to 12 different high schools before I graduated. And then at 17, I joined the Army. And when I was 19, I became an Army officer. At age 20, I got my pilot's license. And when I was 21, I went on active duty with the Army. 22, I got married. And 25, I became an FBI agent. So that was quite a little bit of a race initially in my life. And it really, and I studied geography at UCLA. So it gave me a big perspective on things, maybe from the air, whether you're flying or learning to read maps and geography and using those maps as an infantryman in Germany to, doing operations with the FBI for that amount of time. And I moved around a lot, and when I moved, I'd get in a lot of fights. That was just because people would want to sort of test me for a while. And in one occasion, I got into 4 fights in one day. It was 8th grade, first day of 8th grade, and word got out that I got into 10 fights, and that I kicked everybody's, what. So then people started, hands off. I'm all, this is pretty cool. I got sort of rewarded for getting in fights. But what happened later on, about 2-3 months later, people would start to try to challenge me. They heard about me and they wanted to start a fight with me. And I found out the hard way, getting cold cocked a few times on the head and temple, that, that path really wasn't my path. So I knew that I needed to change something. And so anyway, I've been in the FBI for 25 years. I guess, conflict for me, managing conflict's been a big part of my career. I have 3 kids, 2 that are in college, 1 in high school, and I've been married for 32 years. So, I retired from the FBI 4 years ago. I became a Peace Scholar with Rotary International. And I work with Be the Peace, Be the Hope here in town as a part-time facilitator for them. And I'm also a security consultant. So that's sort of my background. And the reason why I'm speaking to you today is I think that there's, it's very easy to study international relations, history and war. These topics are very easily accessible to people. And one thing that really is lacking is peace education, just the basics of peace education. So if there's no further questions, I'd like to just start off with a few basics of peace and conflict studies. Any questions, anyone? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see, let's go here and here. We'll start the show. Okay, so we're going to talk about some general concepts, some ideas about peace building, creating inner peace and outer peace, and peace as a creative act. So generally, when we are talking about peace, we start off at what actually causes conflict. And Johan Galtung, he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner from Norway, did a lot of research in conflict studies, and he came up with this conflict triangle that he called ABC triangle. So it comprises of attitudes, how the types of attitudes that we have in regarding peace. And one second, let me turn off something here.
I'm wondering whose toilet just flushed. We need to mute everyone except the speaker.
No, everyone is muted. That's Marc.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm outside. My jacuzzi went off, so just had to turn it off real quick. So anyway, we have attitudes on how we look at conflict. We also have behaviors, and what are the behaviors that create conflict? So what actions do we take? Verbal actions, physical actions. Attitudes might be attitudes towards what deserves punishment, what the idea of even deserving punishment. A lot of the language that we use, like using words like should. Well, you should do something, or else what? What is behind that? So, and then the context of it, the society context, the social, economic, historical aspects of conflict. Then there's, of course, visible conflict, what we see on the surface, and then another conflict which is sort of invisible. We don't see it, it's under the surface. And these are all really important to be addressed, because when there's needs that are unaddressed, they often stem and down the road will raise their heads as conflict, right, down the road. Even after a battle has been done or a war is over, if those underlying issues aren't addressed, or even in social conflict in society, those things aren't addressed, then they seem to rear their ugly head to the next generation. So that's basically about conflict. And then we talk a little bit about accommodating, compromising, avoiding, competing, and collaborating in a way of dealing with conflict. So, we could think of like at a hotel, somebody comes in with a gripe and the manager will find a way to accommodate them and maybe give them a little gift or a bigger room or something like that. There might be a cost involved and they might split the cost. That's a compromise, right? They may, let's say if you were at the hotel and you're overcharged for something, maybe you want to just avoid the conflict and not even bring it up, right? And let's say compete as a way of dealing with conflict. We can think about the space race, right? And the arms race. We can compete and try to win a conflict, or we can do like the space station and collaborate and work together to put up a space station that goes around the planet. So there's different approaches. to dealing with conflict. And one of the things I want to do at this point was to have a really quick breakout session on when you experience conflict, how have you resolved it? So is there a way of breaking the group up and to do that?
Perfect. Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have the access to breakout sessions, so we would just have to do it in the group together as a whole, just to converse.
Okay, well, in that case, let's go ahead and take a minute. And would anyone like to share with the group how they've worked through conflict in the past?
I tend to get loud and want my way. I'm hoping as I grow up, I'll change that, and maybe your presentation today will help me.
Well, so yeah, so in a sense, it's maybe competing at some level. We could call it that, and dominating in a way of working through a conflict. And how does that work for you, Mary?
It's not effective. I seem to get more and more frustrated instead of solving.
That can get frustrating. Anyone else like to share on ways of dealing with their conflicts in their lives?
Yeah, I can. Most of the times I just try to compromise. It's easier to try to meet in the middle than try to convince the other person that either you're right or wrong, because if you try to convince them they're wrong, it just ends up being an attack. So by trying to kind of come together and find a middle ground, most of the times it ends up working in both of our favors.
Yeah, that's a good point, and some people go, well, you don't have to compromise to negotiate. And, that may be true in some instances, but I think that sometimes compromise can be a good thing. And if we look at it, am I really compromising myself when I'm compromising? Yeah, does it make sense? So maybe you're really not compromising yourself. Maybe you are honoring another value of fairness, right? And equity and autonomy. So just having a different attitude on how we look at what conflict is and how we get over conflict can also be helpful. Anybody else like to share?
Yeah, I could share one.
Yeah.
I know normally I like to get different perspectives. Like if a conflict did arise and obviously we didn't come to a conclusion, I'll just try to get different perspectives on the situation from different people and just to hear their input and maybe see where I went wrong or what I could have did better, how I can approach it differently for, future times and stuff like that.
That's really good, because when we get the different perspective, not only we create what's known as understanding. So the word understanding really is what is the common ground that we're all standing on, right? So being aware of that understanding is really important. And a lot of times conflict goes away when we actually listen to somebody and they just want to be heard. And it's not necessarily always about being right or wrong. It's more about, just being heard. And, maybe they don't expect anything to come from it, but just that you care enough to listen and understand. That can often diffuse conflict. And anybody like to add anything more to this?
Yeah.
Oh, Ishika. Hello, Ishika.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's for me it's kind of a mix between what Teray and Jacob said, that I would like to compromise, but rather than just blindly kind of coming to a compromise, I wanna understand the point of view, and I want to have the other person understand my point of view. So it's not like a heated argument, but rather a discussion.
Yeah, and saying your side as well and having your voice heard as well, and all that is so important. And conversely, hearing that person is very important as well. because at the end of the day, a lot of us want to be understood and heard. Sometimes for me, it's like, I think, well, is it easier just to avoid it? And it's, I'll just avoid the conflict. Though in some instances, it's really important to be heard, and that you stand up for yourself. And especially when it comes to what, at office places or, school, where you run into bullies, right? And it's more important that they hear you and they know where you stand, rather than, they often respect you more and you have less problems down the road. That's my experience. So going with, if no one has any more questions, I'm going to go ahead to the next topic. Is that pretty good? Well covered. So now we're going to something called peace building. And when the connectors outnumber the dividers, we begin to build peace, right? So there's a concept known as, we can do things in society to engineer peace. And there are some university programs out there that concentrate on peace engineering. So does anyone have an idea what that might mean? Any ideas? Peace engineering.
The only thing that is possibly putting putting systems in place so that it kind of facilitates a greater understanding, so that people can kind of get a better understanding of the other parties working with them and work towards the ultimate goal, whatever that may be.
Absolutely, Jacob. Good explanation. It's creating systems in society and within our families and in structures that allow for people to flourish and to create more peaceful conditions, so that there's more success-based outcomes that way. So there's more harmony in society. This is a quick list here. So there's an organization called Institute for Economic and Peace. They come out with publication every year, Global Peace Index. And if you see on the left, there's the rankings for the top 10 in the world. And you can see that a lot of them are often Northern European countries. Seems like also some countries in Asia. Obviously Portugal, Czechoslovakia or Czechia, Japan. So a lot of the well-known countries that are known to have very stable societies. And then on the other hand, we have the USA, which is ranked number 121. And some of the reasons why it's, a lot of Americans go, well, this is a pretty peaceful country here. Why is it rated at a different level than what we would think? And in fact, I think it's plummeted in its ratings in the last couple of years. A lot has to do with the way they weigh these rankings, and they have certain criteria. They have 23 criteria, including arms sales, the spending on the military, the conflicts where their forces are engaged both internally and abroad. And as you know, we've been in a state of perpetual warfare basically since 9/11. And some people could argue well before that, since World War II. And much of our history, the US history, some people believe that the US has been encouraged by its success at warfare. So those are some perspectives that are out there that may have influenced that ranking. And then our other neighbor, remember, number 6 on the list is it's actually it's Canada. And Canada is our northern neighbor, whereas our southern neighbor, Mexico, ranks even lower than the US, quite a bit more, due to a lot of the internal suppression of people, socioeconomic inequities, drug wars, etc. The lack of rule of law
You know, these basic things that we take for granted in the United States are clearly not evident in a lot of places in the world. So and they base this on those 23 rankings that are also based on the concept of negative peace and positive peace. So if we look at this definition here, negative peace is the absence of violence or the fear of violence. So when there's a forced ceasefire that's enacted, whether it's in the Middle East or another country where, you know, the UN comes in and forces a ceasefire, it's called negative peace. Yeah, nobody's getting shot, but there's all the underlying conditions are still there that would create that conflict. The other concept is known as positive peace, and that's just the attitudes, the institutions, the structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. Back to peace engineering, right? So looking at that, these are some of the factors that the Institute looks at that they measure that would lead to a higher rating on the peace scale. And everything from well-functioning governments, low levels of corruption, free flow of information, high levels of human capital. That means people are really well trained and acceptance of rights of others, sound business environment. So people want to, you know, the contract law and their businesses are protected. Good relations with neighbors. And we have fairly good relations, definitely with our northern neighbor. Our southern neighbor, we do have some contention consistently. And of course, equitable distribution of resources. So this leads us to our next question, the breakout session here. And just raising a question with the group, how can we build greater peace in our communities? And just wanted to throw that out. Anybody have some thoughts on that? Anybody like to share?
I would, if it's okay. Hi.
So,
I think one of the things that I always have gripes with is just not being heard. One of the things is that a lot of the problems within communities in particular can be solved if every individual feels like they're being heard. Often the gripe comes, well, oh, I didn't get to speak, or I didn't have to give my 2 cents. Whether your 2 cents make a difference or not is not so much the issue. It's the fact that you weren't able to give the 2 cents in the first place. And if people feel like they are making a contribution, whether they're not or whether they are is irrelevant. If they feel like that, often any animosity towards, you know, a certain race or a stereotype that you might be confined to, a lot of that can be erased just by that.
Wonderful, Alian. That's a wonderful observation, and I think one that we can all take to heart. It's often so important that we are heard and others are heard. And when we do that, often the conflict subsides. And you know, whether or not you can do anything about it, sometimes just holding that space for that person so that they feel understood and heard is a lot of the issue. And of course, that can also bring up ideas and ways that we could work, you know, move forward together in finding a solution. And anyone else like to add to ways of building greater peace in our communities?
Yeah, I could add something. I would say on a very like local scale, especially in a place like Houston, we live in such a diverse area that it's so easy for any of us to really go out and just talk to people and be educated, because I think if you just try to talk to your neighbors or your classmates or anyone, you get to hear so many different perspectives and you get to learn so much about how other people are living. And I think if you're just aware, which is essentially what Alian said, if you're just aware about the people around you and what and why they feel a certain way, I that can really help build peace, because I think a lot of times this lack of peace just comes from misunderstanding or just not understanding in general.
Yeah. So Ishik, I heard awareness of other people's feelings and how that can contribute to peace and understanding. And very nice, nicely put. And anyone else like to join in? So Jacob, would you like to say something?
I
I
was
saw
just,
your.
yeah, I was just gonna continue on what Ishika said and talk about like personally, like on an individual level, I take like if there is a confrontation, normally I do like the 24-hour rule, or like if it's that big of a deal in 24 hours, then I will address it then, and that kind of allows all of the personal emotions of like the heatedness of the argument to kind of subside before the actual conversation takes place.
Yeah, that can help a lot as well, right? That giving time and space, and then seeing how you feel after a day. A lot of this, when we come to these situations that are conflictual, it's really important to have that self-compassion and understand and really give ourselves some consideration of what made you feel that way. And sometimes when we give ourselves that time to really consider why we felt in that conflict, we can extend more compassion to the other person when we give ourselves some compassion. And that time and space also allows us from moving from a visceral reaction to more of a well thought out reaction. So we're not using so much what they call the survival brain, but maybe our thinking brain, one that moves away just from a visceral response to more of a compassionate and understanding response, not only with the other person, but ourselves as well. So we talked a little bit about that, creating not only, and so what does that take really to create that voice, that inner muscle within us on taking that 24-hour break, or giving ourselves that self-compassion and giving ourselves time. There's a skill involved in all this, and of being able to step back and maybe be curious or more engaged in a curious way, where we're not necessarily judging the other person or ourselves, but we can stay more in a neutral, curious place of where that conflict is coming from. And as long as we're coming from that place, often, because people, pick up when they're being judged or talked at. And so it's really important to just hold that space and be curious and find out more, or knowing yourself, maybe it's a good time to take a break and just, really consider your feelings and how that made you feel. And some of these skills we develop over time, and we're not always taught these skills of creating that time and space, and also that curiosity and that neutrality that often helps in conflictual situations. Anybody else like to add to the talk?
Hello. This reminds me a lot about, I read a few pages on Joshua Green, and he talks a lot about common sense morality. So he basically speaks about morals and how different communities have different morals. So like if someone goes against your morals, you tend to become more aggressive towards that community. So I feel like, basically learning about different cultures will really open your mind to understand like they're not trying to, go against you or your own culture. Like they just have different backgrounds. And I feel like that could really benefit us in building greater peace within our communities.
Hey, Berardo, I love it. Very fantastic observation, and how understanding of where people are coming from, depending on their background and understanding and education and all that stuff. Keeping that in mind, that everyone has their experience, and validating that experience wherever that comes from, and holding again that space of validating people rather than judging people. And oftentimes we were trained because, you know, our whole school system, our legal system places us in a position of being victors or you know, losers or winners, right? I mean, the legal system is about that. It's very competitive. Schools, you know, whether you get a good grade or a bad grade, it's very evaluative, right? So and a lot of morals and systems are judging good and bad. And so we grow up with all this, you know, this information that sometimes can create conflict within ourselves and outside of ourselves. So thank you, Everard. So moving on, let's just explore a little bit just so that we can stay and cover all the bases. That again, as other people have mentioned, understanding where people are coming from is really important in understanding conflict. And sometimes the conflict may arise and it may not be your issue. It might be directed at you, but it may really be more about their issue, right? And sometimes people that are going through a hard time can react in a way that sort of like lashing out, you know, like an animal that's hurting, that, you know, that reaction of I'm in pain and I want people to know. And you know, there's a lot of people that have gone through different experiences in life and they get triggered by different things and go, well, why did that person react so you know, violently or you know, vehemently? And there might be things that happened to them that were, you know, that reminded them of a situation, you know, so past and present trauma, the situation. Oftentimes, you know, people that feel isolated and insecure. And we all have felt some level of this during our lives. And this is all part of being a human, right? And so, and I make a point here that even peace builders often have internal struggles that may create conflict. So I mean, I've met with many people that work in the area of peace, and they carry with them a lot of their inner struggles. And often when we're working together on a project, you would think that you'd have more harmony if that's that person's stated reason to be, is to work in peace. And often, though, they may have internal struggles that sort of leak out into their work, where it makes it very difficult to work with them, right? And they bring their issues, no matter where you go, you bring yourself with you. So it's goes to show everyone has their, you know, internal struggles, their challenges, and we're always working on, you know, on bettering ourselves and learning more about how to work through these things. So one of the things from my perspective, there's many perspectives on peace, and as just as many people are, and there's many theories that are out there and taught in many schools. And one of the things that I really resonate with is the idea of creating inner peace in order to create and manifest peace around you. So you might have all the best intentions of having a great peace project out in the community, bringing people together, but if you yourself, or myself, and if this were my situation, had an internal struggle or a pain or something that hadn't been resolved, and I go out in the community, I'm going to often spread that pain within that community rather than creating more peace. So, you know, they say, know thyself, and obviously work on thyself and your own inner peace. And I think that's really important, as I won't say a prerequisite, but also a very important part of pursuing peace is working on ourselves and finding out what brings peace
to ourselves, and that varies from person to person. So the idea of finding inner peace, there's so many paths to finding inner peace, right? So it could be people need to take a run or get their workout, and that sort of brings a level of peace. Some people like to do movement and dance, and that releases, they like to embody that peace and work out tensions. And others, work through prayer and meditation, singing and music, art and creativity. A lot of times work brings a lot of peace to people, especially if it's, really aligned with you and your purpose, and it's a good fit. You can really get a lot of peace, inner peace, through doing your purpose in life, your service, doing positive things by helping others, helping within the community. So there's many ways of working through not only inside, but having that manifest outside. So let's move on to breakout question number 3. And so just wanted to invite people to consider and just share what brings you inner peace. What do you do to find your inner peace?
So for me personally, I would say that I use like a combination of different things, from doing yoga to prayer and meditation. So every day I do some type of prayer or a devotional, just to recognize and align myself. And then also just like movement-based dancing or movement-based therapy, which is always really nice for me to just get that inner peace, and also just kind of create the kind of environment that I want to be inside of. So that kind of carries, I feel like home is within me. So I always take that no matter where I go with me, and spread that joy within me.
That's wonderful, Felicia. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's a combination of practices find their way into your palette, your routine, and your tools, the tool chest. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And one other thing that I would add is, I like how you said the tool chest, because I think that, me personally, I found that having multiple tools, because one moment something might work in one season or for one situation, that does not work in the next one. So for me, being able to like use my toolbox and also kind of take inventories of that toolkit that I have, to see what's actually working for me and what's not working, and maybe some things that worked previously, I need to switch them out for whatever's happening at that moment. So I'm glad that you used that term.
Oh, wow. So yeah, you like to switch out, and it sounds like a little bit of experimentation there too.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anyone else like to add? How do you find your inner peace? Well, myself, I like to take hikes sometimes, and I like to walk my dogs. I like to do exercise. I do qigong and I do yoga. Certain movements really are nice to open up the body and embody a type of harmony. Doing affirmations too. Saying positive affirmations is really cool. And I love to, work on my projects. A lot of meditation is helpful for me as well. I like to conduct, share my gifts and do workshops too, and I like to do sound healing. So I do some sound healing and water work with people. And so all those things contribute to my sense of self-peace and inner peace. And when I find when I'm more grounded in my inner peace, I'm better prepared to, my cup is filled. And so I'm better able to hold that space for people that may not be in that place of as much peace, or they need more understanding. When I understand myself and I've given myself the compassion enough to be present with that other person and be curious rather than being defensive and judgmental. And there's one thing in Be the Peace, Be the Hope that we often teach in it, and with some of the students, and it's called STAR. So smile, take a breath, and relax. So just smiling when you're hearing something that's really conflictual, or somebody saying something, and just allow yourself to take a deep breath, and try not to, don't smile in a way maybe that might seem like you're, I guess, disrespecting them in any way, but if you can, and if it's appropriate, try to, but just smile, take a breath, and relax. So even if you just take a breath, they say that for your thinking brain to get activated, because oftentimes when we're in a conflictual situation and we get triggered, right, by a certain word, or somebody seems threatening to us, and our little spidey sense goes off and we want to run off or fight, or we freeze, as they say. When that happens, it's really important to keep the oxygen going in our brains. And by taking a deep breath in and releasing, that's about 7 seconds. And they say that 7 seconds is, usually a minimum amount of time for a thinking brain to kick in. If you need more time, I always tell people to try to get in a place of, first off, self-compassion, saying, why would anyone say that? Or why would anyone do that? And just throwing that question out there to that person. Why would anyone say that? But not from a judgmental way, but do it in a real curious way. And that may give that person more time to think of an answer, giving them also more time to move away from their triggered response. So something like, tell me more, and doing it from a very neutral or curious perspective can often help de-escalate some of these situations. So in fact, some military forces and people in law enforcement also, if you're on a SWAT team, they often are taught tactical breathing, which is 4-second breaths in, 4-second breath, like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your pause. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and another pause. So that gives your brain time to catch up to your survival brain, your thinking brain with your survival brain. And often what happens in these stress situations, we create tunnel vision. When we breathe, that tunnel vision starts opening up. And when we open up, we also allow for things to enter our subconscious, which our reactions are much faster in our subconscious mind. So we can see things on our periphery that we may not see directly in front of us, so we can more quickly react. They always, conscious reaction is often much slower than a subconscious reaction. So being aware of how our body is, how our breath is, and how we're feeling enough to know when we are in a situation where we'd like to create more time and distance in a situation are some of the ways of also when we're under stress can be helpful. Any other people like to join in on on that and would like to say something?
I'm sure. I think what Felicia said, I am also really big on, I do like certain chants and prayers when I'm feeling really overwhelmed and stressed. And another thing that I really like to do is I like to talk to someone about it because I feel like a lot of the times, whatever might be troubling you seems a lot bigger in your head or just to yourself than it really does when you talk about it out loud and try to come to logical conclusions about it with someone else. Yeah.
Thank you, Ishika. Yes, sharing and being brave enough to share what's going on inside. Often somebody becomes a resonant sounding board that will receive and be supportive of what you have to share. And when we have that, that's why one of the reasons why psychology works is that you have a resonant witness, someone that is listening attentively to what you're saying. And when we have a witness, or we actually witness someone's sharing of something, it's actually a big part of the not only feeling better and resolving conflict, but it's a big part of healing as well. So it's really, really a great strategy, Ishika, that you practice, and sharing that with everyone here is really wonderful. Thank you. So anyone else like to join in with what do you do to find inner peace? You know, there's endless amount of practices. You know, the key is finding something that works for you. I know my son loves to go rock climbing, whether it's outside or in a rock climbing gym. And even in these days, he goes to the rock climbing gym with his mask on and climbs the face of a wall where he can just concentrate on his next grip and next placement of his foot, and you know, doing things that sort of allow you to concentrate on the here and now. When I'm working with Qigong, one of the things I do in part of the standing meditation is I tell people to bring up one hand up in prayer position. As you do so, you're pouring out the regrets of the past. With the other hand, bring up your other hand, pouring out the anxiety of the future. And where they meet together, is that it dissolves into the present moment. So these are a way of keeping our mind focused on the present, and you know, just the importance of having a way of disconnecting from some of one's anxieties and one's regrets. So so with that, let's go ahead and talk about, you know, peace as a creative act. So we talked about some theory. We talked about finding inner peace, and a lot of times creating peace within our community and outside of ourselves often requires a large amount of self-understanding and inner peace, but also the ability to be creative and find creative solutions, trust in people, take risks. And really, when we talk about trust in people, we're talking about trust in yourself, because I found that people that have problems trusting others often don't trust themselves. So learning to create that muscle of trust for your own judgments and your own behavior, and taking responsibility for that, is often a big part of it. And having the confidence to do something like take a risk. You know, artists are often very good at it because all the time their whole life is a big, you know, creating art. You're not sure if anyone's going to ever like it, you know, but you just have to go with that inner trust your inner guidance, and create that. There's a great book, Letters to a Young Poet, that talks a lot about that. So artists, yes, they have a capacity of really creating peace in a society and bringing people together, because a lot of their work crosses boundaries, whether it's music, whether it's the spoken word, whether it's poetry, whether it's a book, all these things. Street artists, people come together and all their differences often melt away, and their common humanity becomes so apparent because there's that transcendent quality about art. And bringing that understanding and creating that common ground is often what music does, what art does. And in some cases, it speaks truth to power. And if you look in lots of the world, some artists in many places are being silenced by, when they speak truth to power, they get incarcerated, or sometimes killed. And that goes for journalists as well. So it's important to just be aware of the power of art and the creative potential. And there's John Paul Lauterock talks a lot about this concept of being an artist and your piecework and taking a chance and embracing the complexity of a situation with all its difficulties and appreciating all the difficulties, not writing it off, not acknowledging the complexity, but recognizing that complexity and taking a chance of creating that bridge, of reaching out to somebody and being kind to that person, even though you may not have the exact same understanding of the situation. There might be commonalities and common interests that you do have, and identifying those and creating that bridge for connection is so important as a first step of creating that common ground where, we may not agree on all aspects of an issue, but maybe there's a bigger need of community or of unity or of respect that we all can agree to, that would transcend even different takes on a certain position. And the need for freedom, the need to be heard. And somewhere along the line, there's going to be some common ground that transcends the individual issue at hand, that there are some greater needs that will unite us. So with that, let's go to the last breakout session question. What creative acts might you do for more peace in your life? So anyone have any ideas of how you might engage in the community to create more peace? Some sort of creative acts that you could do to reach out to others as an expression often of your own inner peace. Though it's not exclusive of that, certainly that often can be the case.
Sometimes I do art and then I'll just put a nice quote that is a peaceful something to meditate, and I create these and turn them into cards for people maybe that are going through a rough time. And that helps me. I think it's a win-win because they like getting them, and then while I'm in the process, it helps me.
That's beautiful, Mary. I hear you. That's probably exactly what that person needed as a little pick-me-up and gesture of kindness. And kindness is a thing that when we give it, it keeps on giving. People find ways to pass it on. And it may not happen immediately or overnight in any way, but over time, when we put a lot of kindness forth, eventually comes back in many ways, and it radiates throughout the community and improves, again, the understanding and common ground that we all share. That's a wonderful way. And just, you're having a hard day, and then all of a sudden you get this wonderful note, is just exactly, puts a smile on someone's face. And whatever happened earlier in the day, it gives us hope for that common humanity and the common need for connection and
One
acknowledgement.
thing, I'll
Yeah.
say this, one thing that's helped my blood pressure this afternoon is listening to your calm voice. After being with kids that are working on projects and so loud in class, this has really been peaceful for me. So thank you, Mark.
Oh, so nice of you to say, Mary. So
Hey, Mark.
thank you for your sharing. Felicia.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we had one more minute for the before.
Okay. Okay, so looks like someone just wanted to come in. So again, if anyone has anything else they would like to add in creative acts, oftentimes going out and doing something as a group, whether, the Boy Scouts, other organizations, I don't know, community groups, the Rotary Club, church groups, they're out there in the community doing service, right? So that often translates into helping other people out. So it might be a very creative approach. So with that, I guess we are running out of time. Though I don't know if your portal's going to shut down, Felicia, or those that want to stay and ask questions, if that's available. But I just wanted to extend that if that is available for anyone.
We can take maybe just a couple questions, maybe one or two, just so that we don't overextend into the next meeting that's coming up after.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
So did anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Mark?
If no one has a question, hey, Mark, it's Ronan. Thanks for that great presentation and for talking to the council so many times in the past. I know just with your study and your expertise, I know you've been a Rotary Peace Fellow, I think in Southeast Asia or other places you've worked. Have you found, I mean, a lot of times there's kind of after a country goes through massive conflict, whether it be a civil war or say South Africa coming out of apartheid, there are two kind of options, whether to go with kind of peace and reconciliation, commissions and trying to collectively move together, or having court cases and I suppose trying to bring at least the leaders to whatever levels of crimes or repression or violence have been committed. Which path do you think perhaps has worked best?
My tendency is to go towards one of more healing, though I think there might be a good ability to mix the two. Do you concentrate on the top leaders that were, responsible, and then the rest of the society, it becomes more of a reconciliation, especially if like in Rwanda, the majority of the citizens were involved, or a large portion. I don't know about the majority, but the large proportion of the people were involved. And same as in Cambodia, you can't jail or your whole population. So I think a mix of doing a little bit about the top leadership makes sense to me. And then if there is a pathway for reconciliation and peace education, forgiveness, and giving these different types of courts where there's more reconciliation, of somebody like a peace commission where somebody might be able to admit their crime or their transgressions and be forgiven after that, could help make more of a unified society after, rather than just creating more scars which have to be revisited again. So you can even look at Iraq, and after the US went to Iraq and ousted the Sunnis, all those tensions and basically kicking out all the Baathists out of the government created this other groups of people that were really dissatisfied, and that came back to haunt the country repeatedly. And so then you continue that cycle of violence, right? So whenever we look at retribution, doesn't take us far to look, within 20 years, typically, we'll see signs of that conflict raise its specter again, because those underlying issues of acknowledgement and of needs haven't been rectified in any way or brought to the surface so they can be addressed with respect and fairness and some type of equanimity and ability to bring society together. And that's, I think, really important, whether it's society here in the US or some examples abroad, how important it is to be able to come together and find those commonalities. And at the end, when we forgive our others, we can better have a peace in the society. Often that requires us to forgive ourselves at a very deep level, and not be so self-judgmental, and to be more self-compassionate, so we can be in a better place to extend that out to other people. But that often takes time and a lot of work for people to want to do, because there's a lot of deep wounds that people are walking around with.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks for that question.
Thank you so much, Mark. I don't want to keep people too long, as we have something after this for some of our other kids. But I wanted to take this opportunity just to thank you so much for sharing perspectives on peace with us and asking us just to look inward. What does peace look like in the community? What does peace look like? And what are things that we actually do? And hopefully this kind of got people's turning and thinking about ways that we can create peace in our community, in our own backyard, as well as think of tools that we can use ourselves to be creative and cultivate peace within us. So again, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you, Felicia, and thanks to the World Affairs Council and all the people here online on the Zoom call. Real pleasure meeting you and hearing your words on this really important topic. It's a topic that we don't learn about enough in our school systems and universities. And there's a lot of amazing research being done and some very powerful tools that can be working for us to bring communities together rather than pulling us apart. So with that, much thanks to you and everybody here.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for coming out to Conversations with the Conscience with the World Affairs Council. I'm Felicia Chapman, the Senior Education Manager. And again, I just want to thank you, and hopefully you will come back with us tomorrow as we have another great program with Walter Isaacs. So thank you again. For those who are just joining us for Academic World Quest Nationals, please stay on the call as we will kind of switch gears to talk about the national competition that happens in about 3 weeks. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Felicia.
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm just getting, I mean, I was in the worst traffic. I was stuck behind an accident and I couldn't get out.
Oh, wow.
So I just this minute have gotten home. But anyways, I see that Turner was there. My kids were there, so
No worries.
they'll fill me in.
Give me a quick second. Ishika, Jake, Everardo, Alian, you're all good to go. We're switching for Academic World Quest. Thanks so much, Jake, for doing the intro for us.